Hey folks, this week Doc joins me and we talk about personal AI. Sort of a wish list for what we want that to be, and then some thoughts about how to get there. We look up a couple of projects that may get us there if you're willing to put the pieces together and more. It's a lot of fun, you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. This is Floss Weekly, episode 824, recorded Tuesday, March 11th. Gratuitous navel gazing. Hey folks, it is time for Floss Weekly. That's the show about free, libre, and open source software. I'm your host, Jonathan Bennett, and today we've got a co-host and a guest who are the same person. That's because we've got Mr. Doc Searles with us today. And we were scrambling for a guest today, and I said, well, I thought I had one, but then it turned out he couldn't do it today. And Doc said, well, you know, I was supposed to be at Scale and do a presentation, and I didn't get to do it because I had some medical thing come up. I believe you said you're fine, by the way. It was just one of those things. Yep. And I said, come, let's do the presentation you were going to do at Scale. Let's do it on the show. And he said, let's do it. So what are we talking about, Doc?
So here we are. At Scale, there was also the Quai Summit. Quai is an open source project toward personal AI, and I'm involved with it. It has like 700 or 800 volunteers at this point. It's got some code, mostly working on an OS. But I don't want to go into that because I don't know enough about it, and I think it's beside the kind of points that I wanted to make in the talk I was going to give there.
Sure.
But I couldn't do it, so, and I thought, well, I'll just give the talk here. But I ended up having this really interesting conversation with ChatGPT about what personal AI is and should be. That was a leading conversation in the sense that I kind of urged it in the directions I wanted to go. The skeptic in me wants to say that having a conversation with one AI about another AI, that's sort of gratuitous navel gazing. Well, it's in a way, except the baby that produces the navel hasn't been born yet. So it's personal AI, and I've said this a bunch of times, I think personal AI in 2025 is pretty much exactly where personal computing was 50 years earlier in 1975. A really good idea. We don't have it yet. I mean, there's some examples of it out there. I think in 75, by that time, the Apple I was out, and the Apple II was on its way. And in the next several years, we had the TRS-80 and the Sinclair and the Osborne and a bunch of others. But it was hardly thinkable. And so we tended to think of personal computing then as, well, how do we put a mainframe on your desktop, right? And it's the same way now. It's like, well, how do we take corporate AI and make it personal for you? And then we're still thinking inside the corporate world. We're still thinking, and we're getting a difference now, of course, is that there was no access to computing in 1975 rather. Nobody had any access to it unless they worked for a big company or something like that. And they were doing batch processing with cards and stuff like that. And, the Altair was out, and you could program it with switches, little switches.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And snap a paper tape or something through this thing. And that was personal computing. But that's what got Bill Gates going on it. Like he took one look at the Altair and said, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And he dropped out of Harvard to do it, and the rest is history.
He did rather well for himself.
He did rather well for himself with that, but I think there's a sort of a paucity of imagination about. It's not even imagination. I think we're just not considering what we need from a personal AI that we're not going to get from the corporate kind. Starting with the fact that it's yours and it's private. The main thing for me is the data. All of corporate AI has been trained on the entire web, plus lots and lots of books, lots of other things. It's a massive amount of stuff that is trained on. The models are great. They're not what they're going to be, but they've used that data and a lot of programming and logic to do a really good job of speaking in English or whatever language you want to choose and making a lot of inferences and for one thing or another, and emulating humanity and human conversation and stuff like that, that we're all very familiar with, and to the point where it's very, very useful. And in fact, I think they've done a terrific job of leapfrogging Google. I mean, Google should have been here 5 years ago. They're not. They weren't. But where we've replaced this, again, we're in the corporate world right now. We've replaced searching as if you're looking through a library with Q&A, with queries. You don't need to look in the books in the library. You just ask the library a question, and its concierge looks through the library and gives you an answer or a collection of answers that are quite credible and useful. And you go past that and say, great library, now, do my term paper for me, and it'll do that, right? So it's very handy that way. But we have these sort of two modalities there, which is one is search and index, and the other is ask it a question. And ChatGPT kind of modeled the ask it a question, but now Meta, Microsoft, and Anthropic, and a bunch of others have come up with alternatives that are all roughly the same. Some are better than others. I like Perplexity because it gives you sources. But again, it's looking at a giant index and answering questions. The key piece here for personal AI is, how do we do the same thing for our lives that corporate AI is doing for the world? And and our lives are our contacts, our calendars, all our health records, all our financial records, our obligations, our recurring payments. When we bring the garbage and the recycling out to the curb, what do we pay for that? Who did we pay for that? Our travels, where were we when we had lunch with so-and-so? Our work, keeping records of our work, especially if, and you and I are both kind of solo operators in some ways. We have consulting businesses. When do we do such and such for so-and-so? What do I owe them? What did they pay? When? How long did it take them? I mean, all this kind of stuff. And we don't have that yet, and we don't have it in a coherent form. And an awful lot of the data that we would need is in the hands of people who are not us. Okay, so for example, we're watching White Lotus and Reacher right now, and we're watching them on our new Samsung TV, and we have an Apple Gizmo that hangs off the side, and how does, and I don't remember where we were with either of these. We haven't watched them in a couple of months. How many episodes are we into this? I don't want to just do a Q&A on that. I want to look at something. I want to look at something that's like a spreadsheet that I can refine to say, okay, give me a list of all of the subscriptions that I have to streaming services. And that includes, in my case, Sirius XM on 2 cars and portable devices. Plus Sonos, I've got that. I've got, but all of these streaming services. And when does it come up for renewal on this? All of these things depend to some degree on your not knowing something. But the TV knows. All your new TVs come with spyware in them. Yes. You need to find where the camera is on it and put a black tape over it because it's there. I was even looking up on ChatGPT or whatever, how do I turn off the surveillance on our new Samsung OLED TV? And what they told me was current like 3 weeks ago, but Samsung has changed it, and now it's something else, and they want to make it as hard as possible for you to turn off the surveillance.
Of course.
And they all do this. But that's another gripe. But I'd rather have is just show me what I've watched and when. And there are countless shows, and we don't even watch that much TV. We all watch some that I don't we'll watch 2 episodes and wait a minute, we've seen this.
Yep.
It's you go into that stuff. So it'd be nice to have that. That's a fairly trivial example. But what's happening in the world right now is that old-fashioned over-the-air TV that got replaced by cable TV and satellite TV, all of that is being replaced by subscription TV, where, for example, if you're a sports fan, oh my gosh, the NFL or the NBA could be on any one of 5 different services. There are all kinds of conditionalities in there. We could use personal AI to solve this. Now, we could go to ChatGPT and ask it questions about that and probably get adequate answers. We're not going to get
Personalized answers.
the personalized answer. Or if we get a personalized answer, it's good. I hate the term hallucinate. I'm sorry, BS is the right term here because that's exactly what it is. It's making something up it hopes you believe, right? That's plausible sounding, but it is BS. And it does that, and it does it very innocently, like butter wouldn't melt in its mouth when it does that. But rather than critique what we have with corporate AI, let's start building personal AI, starting with the data we need to be in control of our lives, not just know stuff about it, but control it. Now I'm old now, but I mean, even back in 2008, when I started in the Harvard medical system, because I was hanging out there at the time and I could get into it. And that's not, by the way, exclusive to Harvard. It's like I'm in the Indiana University system here, and it's called IU Health. It has nothing to do with the university anymore. It's a separate thing. I don't know if Harvard's like that now, but my point is I could send a request to 19 different prior healthcare providers and get back data from them. What I got were scans of faxes of copies of scans of faxes. They're upside down, right side up. Sometimes looked like they were done by Da Vinci because they were written backwards because they were like the mirror of it. Yeah. I mean, it was beyond useless. Beyond useless.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point about this, well, AI might be able to make sense out of this, right? Okay, give me all that crap, this copies of faxes of scans, do OCR, have a model that understands this kind of stuff, apply to it. I would like to be able, I don't know if you've noticed this with Amazon, if you buy stuff on Amazon, it kind of breaks out, if you look at your account records, by shipment. But your Visa bill doesn't line up with that. The dollar amount you pay may be the same, but they're not the same because the Visa bill says $45.23 and you have, a $13.45 on one and $17.65 on another. And you have to start doing algebra or something, or make your own spreadsheet to figure this out. Whereas an AI smart enough to do this, okay, I recognize that as an Amazon bill. I know these conditionalities that are embedded in this. I see this over here. These match up. Okay, we'll work that out. Our property. I have books here in Indiana, in my new bookshelf, my new old bookshelf. We have nothing new. We get it used. It's like this in Oklahoma too. I mean, I'm sure if you go to a thrift shop in California, you're paying 10x what you'll pay in Oklahoma or here in Indiana.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just true. I mean, it isn't the sticker shock. When you go to the coast, you get horrible sticker shock. It's like, wait a minute, the dollar doesn't work here because this is much higher. And when you go from the coast to like we did in Indiana, it's like, wait a minute, this state is on sale. Let's live here. So that's what we're doing. But my point is that I want to be able to take the phone and I want to point it at the bookshelf. It's got very high resolution on the phones now, and take a picture of the spines of those books, have pattern recognition happen, and have a list of all those books, right? And I do that in California where I have books, in New York where I have books, and Los Angeles where I have books, and shoot those, and here's a list of all the books and where they are. Okay, I would like to know that, and I mean the list goes on. I mean our travels. Okay, Google Maps and Apple Maps and all of those know where you've been. They're tracking you. Your car is tracking you. If you have a late model car, it has a cell phone in it. You don't even know the number of that cell phone. It's known by Toyota or Chevy or whoever it is, and they're busy selling information about you to insurance companies because that's an extra way they make money. We need that data. We can use that data. We can make much better use of that data than the assholes that they're selling. I'm sorry, that they're selling it to. Anyway,
So
I'm going on.
I've got a question for you then.
Go for it.
So some of these things that you're talking about like already exist. Let's just say
Yes, right.
photos for instance. So
Yeah.
when I take a photo on my my Android cell phone, it all goes up to Google Photos, and then I can go to Google Photos and say, I want to see pictures of weather, or I want to see pictures of fireworks, or I want to see tech pictures, computer pictures, and it's got an AI, it's got pattern recognition in
Yeah.
there, and it'll do that search and it'll get it back to you. The problem, well, multiple problems, but one of the problem that I have with that is the reason that Google does that is because they also have a clause in their terms of service that you give us the right to use your pictures in such and such way. And they also use that data to train their AI, right? So like there's strings attached. And then the other problem is, that's one service. And then if I want to say, well, where have I been over the past 2 years? That's a completely different service. Those two don't talk to each other correctly. And I'm curious.
And they're not working for you.
Well,
Really.
and that's the other thing. They're not
Yeah.
working for me. My data is the product. I am not the customer, right? And
Right.
so the question is, how do we get there? Is there a path where we get from Google is the AI and I'm the product to I own the AI and it's the product?
I think we start with the low-hanging data fruit that is actually ours, and we can not already sitting out in clouds of various kinds. So I mean, like the book example is one of them. Our own personal property is another. Our purchase records are another. Our contacts and calendars, even though most of our calendars and our email, I hate to even that's the case, are I mean, your email is yours even if it's a Gmail. Okay, it's still yours. You could take that. Thank you, SMTP and IMAP. I can copy that out.
Yep.
I can, but I can move it to some other service. I don't have to have it there. There's let's take the data that is truly or enough ours, and where the gating factor for using it does not require that we go into Google or that we shake down Chevy and Nissan for the data that they've collected about us. That's more of a long-term thing, and then prove the utility of that data to us individually. That makes us, better human beings, citizens, customers, workers, parents, whatever else is involved in that. Because there are many different. We all wear many different hats and play many different roles. But I mean, even like on the parental side, what sports teams are the kids on? What are their grades? What are they doing in school? Where are they? When did they do this?
Right.
Who's the list of their friends? When are their birthdays? I mean, there's that kind of stuff that's of interest to us, but not necessarily to the whole world. But anyway, once we prove some of that out, then we can go after the higher fruit.
Sure. I'm trying to figure out, I guess, the form factor. Like what makes sense. So what would this look like? Are we talking about, Western Digital or Synology building a NAS, a little, a home use desktop NAS, network attached storage, that also has a GPU in it? And then you put all your data in that, and it's going to also index it, and you've got your own little AI that lives inside that desktop hard drive that you can ask questions of. Is that sort of the form factor?
That's my current fantasy, actually. I wouldn't call it a fantasy. That kind of exaggerates, what it might be. I think we need our own. If it's not, I mean, let's say that I'm not sure everything I've been talking about requires all that much compute. I'm not really sure it does, but let's say it does. It requires a lot of compute, and the hardware that you have in your laptop isn't going to cut it. I'd want a separate device. You could certainly get from Synology or any one of those companies, some kind of box that'll sit out there. I imagine somebody will make an appliance at some point that'll do the same thing, that'll have GPUs in it, that are optimized for AI kind of work. But in a way, though, we're before the beginning of this, right? All of this stuff is on the table. that's why I'm just sort of focused on, actually, before we even get to how the processing is done, let's look at what it's working with. And by working with, I just mean our lives. I mean, some people have almost no property, or they rent it all and they don't care about the property. And other people, that's just an enormous part of their lives. And with other people, travel is almost everything, or it's kids or whatever else, or work. I mean, you work all the time, but we go from, most of us go from one job to another. And what do we want to take with us? Is it only in LinkedIn, where you're basically, exaggerating or, whatever to those people? LinkedIn, if you're looking at a way to share employment history or even know what you've done in the world, what a horrible interface to do that with. It's sort of like, we're all social. To me, the contacts I have on my phone and my computer are far more a platform for being social than anything I have in what's called social media. Take Twitter. I followed, a few thousand people on Twitter back when I was active on it. I don't know who most of those people were. I don't remember at all. I sorted them out. Oh, these are journalists. These are all my open source contacts for Linux Journal when I was doing that. It was an enormous number of people. But that was on Twitter, and it was a list on Twitter. I don't even know those lists are still there. I've no idea. Haven't been much on Twitter in recent years. And then, Blue Sky and the rest of them are kind of trying to replicate this really inadequate, horrible writing platform that we had with Twitter and do the whole thing over again. It's like, wait a minute. Oh my God. It's like, we could do better than that. But my point is that I actually think that if we're on top of our lives at home, we are going to be better at doing the things that we do as people, whether it's this as simple as knowing who else we go to church with. It's all this stuff is personal for us, and it matters to us, but it's not, not only isn't, but shouldn't be of that much interest to the Googles of the world, right. Except they're just trying to give you better advertising, which I also think is a flawed model that's going to die in the long run too. We just hasn't died as fast as I wanted it to. But it's a pretty lousy way to run an economy.
Yeah. Oh, I've thought about that. And one of the depressing conclusions that I've come to is pretty much as long as we've had technology, it's been paid for by advertising money. That's how they made the soap operas back on the radio back in the 30s. This show was sponsored by Clabber Baking Soda.
Yeah, what I love about podcasting right now is my favorite line about podcasting is wherever you get your podcasts. Mm-hmm. Turns out RSS is something everybody could use. It costs nothing, and the other thing is I've got a little thing on every different podcast app I can use that says go forward 30 seconds, and I can skip over that stuff. It still helps pay for it, but we had the same thing with VCRs and DVRs, and we could skip over the ads on those too. We just spool stuff and skip over it. But this is a side thing, but it always bothers me when somebody says, you're not saying it. I'm not saying you said it, but I hear this a lot. The internet is paid for by advertising. No, it's not. Google and Facebook are paid for by advertising. They are not the internet. The internet runs on TCP/IP. If you look at the entities that pull the wiring through, we are now on a 2 gigabit fiber connection here, by the way. This is very cool.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's brand new. But I'm not quite on it. It's sphinctered right now through a Wi-Fi hotspot that won't do more than 600 megs. And never mind that. I don't have the router hooked up yet that I'm going to get, but I'm debating which one it's going to be. But I'm paying Gigabit Now, Indiana, for that. Okay, they're not paid for by advertising. They're paid for by ratepayers. Right. Before that, I had Xfinity. I was a ratepayer for Xfinity. Xfinity pulled the cable, the coaxial cable that I used, and they had mostly cable TV on that. They changed their business model to internet. Primarily it used to be cable TV with internet gravy. Now it's internet with cable TV gravy.
Yes,
but it's still rate paying either way, and and all the biggest operators, there's no longer a phone system in there that is all about billing across every border crossing. That's the great thing that TCP/IP did. Is like, I mean, suddenly all of a sudden all the phone and cable companies are looking at each other saying, "Holy shit, we don't have to pay each other for passage because the TCP/IP doesn't do that." And that, I mean, that to me is one of the greatest open source successes in world history. And same with HTTP. You know, Adobe wasn't telling us how to write. You know, here's this open standard where you can just write in HTML, and it is fine. Anyway, I think that I think something analogous is going to happen at the personal level whether we have those boxes. Does the box come first? Does what we do on the box come first? I don't know. I mean, Apple is building into their, M2, 3, and 4 chipsets that some GPU-ish kind of stuff, but it's all for their purposes.
Right.
And what they have right now, and I'm using Apple stuff here, I hate to say it, but there it is. Their Apple Intelligence is all candy. There's nothing nutritive in it at all. Not as far as I could tell. And what there may be that's nutritive is that they've got a kind of ChatGPT backend. There's no imagination about what you can do as an individual when they're probably among the bigs, the best position to do something with that.
Yeah.
But they're not going to because I don't know why, they're who they are. But I think I mean, here's an interesting thought experiment. What would have happened if AT&T had opened Unix in 1983 or 1982 or 1, when it literally it was MS-DOS versus CP/M. I mean, an MS-DOS beat CP/M because DOS was cheaper. Gary Kildall wanted to charge you $1,000 a box or some crazy thing like that. And somebody will come in and say, "No, you're wrong, Searles." Probably I'm wrong. So anybody who's listening and correct me after the fact. But there's, but they wanted to charge for operating systems.
Right.
But what if AT&T had a brain back then and said, "You know what? We should make Unix free and open." What would have happened?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Holy Christmas. I think there's a similar moment right now for open source personal AI.
Yeah.
We don't have open source in corporate AI. That's not there. OpenAI had that sort of mission in the first place, and then they screwed that. And
yeah. Well, so a lot of different directions I want to go with that.
Sure.
There are some open source AIs. Although for various definitions of what it means for an AI to be open source, right? But for example, DeepSeek, all of the models on that is available under the MIT license. You can now you need a little bit of a horsepower video card to do it, or an accelerator, but you can download the DeepSeek model and run it locally, which, in and of itself is really interesting. I have been playing around, not with those sort of LLM models, but I've been playing around a lot with image generation because I find that really fascinating. And I run that. The first thing I found was a website where you could do image generation there. And one of the first things that I was looking at doing is creating characters for tabletop role-playing games. That was something I was into, and I thought, well, if you could make a portrait that was, because I had this whole digital system for doing it, for playing like a tabletop game virtually, and it came to me well, if you could make a portrait, that would be really cool, and so I got into that idea, and then here recently I got to look in, and it's well, I've got a reasonably decent video card in my desktop. How much of this is available in open source where you can actually use it locally? And I found that they're Hugging Face is one of the big
Hugging
names.
Face is there you go.
Yes. It's a whole bunch of open source models, and you can run them locally. And then they've got plugins too. And so one of the plugins they've got is a plugin, I forget what it's called, but you can give it pictures and it will learn to recognize a face. And then you can say, okay, now and people use this for nefarious purposes, right? Don't do that. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can say, okay, I want to see show me a picture of a barbarian standing on the field of battle.
Yeah.
and put my face on it, right? You can do that sort of thing. You can do it locally on your own video card. And so what I'm thinking about with that is you talk about the other revolutions. Like we are all here enjoying the fruit of the personal computer revolution. Well, how did that start? Well, that started with just a few people that thought, "Hey, what happens if we take this nifty new chip from Intel and we put it into a little tiny box with switches on the front?" And they built some of those. And you had a little niche of people that said, "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Here, take my money." And the next thing you know, we've got Dell and IBM, the IBM PC, and eventually, Dell and HP, and everybody wants to make them. I think maybe we're at the same point with personal AI, where right now you have just a small group of enthusiasts, and they're in this niche. And in some ways, maybe we're waiting for the next IBM to come and say, "Well, what if we turn this into a product? What if we make this personal AI thing into a box, or do something that makes sense and put it on people's phones?"
Well, an interesting thing that ChatGPT does in these dialogues is it answers every question with a question at the end. It says, "Well, have you thought about this?" Or like, what is it going to take to make demand happen for this? And that was one of the questions it had, I think. And I said, we need the invention that mothers the necessity, right? That's, we need the thing, I remember it was actually with I had a VIC-20 briefly, but which Linus also had, and it went somewhere with him and never did with me. But I remember when I saw the Osborne looked affordable, and I thought, oh, I got to have that. It's like, you take one look at it and you have to have it. I mean, one reason that we're using iPhones today in this household is my wife took one look at the original iPhone and said, I can work with that.
Yeah.
A funny thing about her is that when she was in the third grade, I think she's second or third grade, she's at this Catholic school, and she said she remembered looking at the nun and pointing at the nun with her pencil and her head, saying to herself, kid's like 7 years old, I can work with this. That's her mind, right?
That's great.
I came to that at about age 30, but that's what we need. I mean, I think that's one reason I think we may need the box. We may need the box that is a Linux box that's independent of Apple and Microsoft and everybody else, that's full of GPUs or whatever else it needs, that you could suddenly throw a bunch of data in and have fun with it and do cool stuff that's AI-ish.
Yeah.
But probably, just put another card in your desktop, I suppose, if you have one of those where you still have backplanes in some worlds, if you have that, you can do that. But we need some things, I think, that will spark imagination and, toward what we can do here.
Everything you've talked about, it strikes me as really the problem we're talking about is search indexing, but for our stuff, not for the internet. And
right.
in some cases, this is indexing physical things. In some cases, it's indexing digital things. It almost seems like the big problem that we're trying to solve here is just a personalized index. And I know, like even in Linux desktops, like KDE, we've had 3 or 4 different file indexing tools, and they've all been terrible. They've all caused problems, right? But like that's sort of what this boils down to, is a really, really good indexing tool, and then plug that into an AI somewhere, which again is not much more than a good search engine, and say, hey, I want to see my receipts that match this criteria. You put it in natural language, very much like how Google has worked for 20 years.
Right.
Now.
Yeah. No, the natural language we've well understood at this point how to make sense of that. So a couple thoughts about that. First, what Google did, and if we go back to 1998, when you were 2 years old.
I was 11. Thank you very much.
You're 11. There you go. But I mean, back then, the understanding of the web before Google came up with its index, and this is the Yahoo model, but the others came at it the same way, was that this is this is a Unix directory, right? And it has directory paths.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all files and paths. That's what the web is. It's all files on paths. That's what a universal resource locator is. That I'm going to locate that. It's in a place. It's a file on a computer somewhere, and I'm going to catalog it. That was the original idea. We're going to catalog this, and that's where Yahoo came from. We're going to catalog. We hired people to basically look at the web as a library, and what Google did instead was saying, we are going to look at all of this as unstructured. We're gonna make our own catalog, but it's not a card catalog like the library. It is going to be this index of data that comes from these links, these locations, but we'll get you back to those locations by looking through this index. So where I'm going with that is, I'm not sure if I take all of, and I may be wrong about this, I'm just thinking out loud. If I take all of my, health, travel, work, contacts, calendar, schedule, property, and look at it like, or have an AI or whatever feeds the AI, whatever the base pile of data that the AI is going to look at, and look at it as, this is all unstructured actually, and I'll leave it up to the AI to figure out what's a photo and what's a bill, and know the difference, or at least have enough association so it can recognize the difference, and work that out for me, in which case that's kind of like a search index. But I'm thinking there might be some other breed here that's not either the catalog model or meaning the Unix path model, nor the pile of data index model that Google pioneered. It's something else, and I'm not technical enough to go to where that might be, but I suspect that unconstraining ourselves from those two models might be better than saying, let's just do it like a search index. But there's probably ways of indexing and ways of cataloging and ways of making sense of data that I don't know, and I'm making shit up right now. So.
So I'm struck by this question, and of course, Google knows the answer, or more accurately, a bunch of nerds on Reddit know the answer, and that is, can we even do this now with pictures? Could I upload all of my pictures? No, not upload. Sorry. Could I dump all of my pictures on a folder on my computer, and then start something that runs probably on my GPU locally, that'll go through and tag and give me a description of each of these, and ideally try to do some OCR and actually get data off of it. And there is at least one project that I'm immediately coming up with. It's LLMII. It's the LLM index, or no, image indexer. And
Cool.
I will have to try this out, because obviously there's more data here than just images, but that in and of itself is a really good starting point. And I'm curious. I really wonder whether we have to do. Let's just say just images. Do we have the pieces out there to be able to do this? Do we already have the pieces out there to say, index all of these photos that I give you? That may include scans of receipts, that may include scans of bills, pictures I've taken with my phone, the pictures in my bookshelf. Here, my local LLMII, my local LLM powered image indexer. Wow, that's hard to say. Here, take all this data, ingest it, and then is there another piece that may even be DeepSeek? Because you can run the like we said, you can run the DeepSeek model locally. Can you then connect the two and be able to query the one and let it use the pictures as part of its data set to look at? And it may be that those pieces are already out there, and there's just not yet a guide that somebody has written on how to make it happen.
I think so. You're probably familiar with LM Studio. Are you familiar with that one you had? LM Studio basically lets you run lots of different models. And I don't think It runs on Linux, but it's not open source, I don't think, because it's a service.
Okay.
But it's a way to say, I want to run DeepSeek on this one. I want to run this Llama on that one. I want to, that kind of thing. I'm sure what you're talking about exists in some ways. What we need is the listeners to this show, to come up with the form of this that is user friendly. That's Muggle friendly. It's not just for wizards. It's for Muggles.
Well, that's always the challenge, right?
Yeah. I know. I mean, how many? I mean, I was around this since 1996. Okay, so what I was thinking, like 29 years. Okay, that just open a shell and do these things, right? So, and 99.x% of people aren't going to do that, and
just buy a Raspberry Pi and install this on it, and then log into your router and forward ports, and then go buy a DNS address, and boom, you're running your own website, and everybody else.
Exactly.
You want me to do you want me to bake a Raspberry Pi? What?
Yeah, exactly. Want me to close my windows? How will I have to walk around the house?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we need the invention that mothers that necessity, and I'm sure most of the, I mean, as I was saying earlier, the resemblance between now and 1975 ends with the simple fact that what we didn't have in 1975 was the power of mainframes at all. It wasn't available, so we had to go from the bottom up and build everything from stolen parts, as Wozniak did from his work at HP.
Yeah.
And we're not there now. We can, all the mainframe stuff is being, going out to us. And thank you, China, for DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Hey, fantastic. So we have so much more to work with there. But I think I think the main thing to realize is that we're going to have so much more market activity when all the individuals are far more equipped than they are now to do things that they can't do now. And I mean, that's what happened with PCs. It's like, I mean, if you go back to 1982 and asks an MIS director, because they called IT directors that then, ask your MIS director, could you mind if we bring some PCs into this company? You'd say, no way. We have mainframes. We have guys in white coats on raised floors. We will do it our way. And then within a year or two, they're all running PCs all over the company because it turned out that the workers could do more with PCs than they could with the mainframe. And we need a similar moment here where, and it's not just inside enterprises, because in a way that's a bad example. It's that, I mean, it's because Bob Frankston and Dan Bricklin came up with spreadsheets so they could do math work, that business changed utterly because we had spreadsheets now, right? And, there's we need people scratching personal itches to pull their lives together. How do I make better sense out of my life than I'm making right now? And we have to, we have to prove to the big makers of the world that we can do more with our data and data about us than they can. We don't have that right now. I mean, the example you gave earlier about, well, geez, I could dump all my photos into Google Photos and I can query against that. I mean, it works the same way with Apple, give me clouds or give me, whatever. And they do facial recognition. You'd say, this is Joe, and it'll say, here are all the photos with Joe. But again, it's in their system. It's using their off-world intelligence to make sense of that. But there's some kind of breakthrough we need on our side that it isn't so much that it proves it to the world, it proves it to ourselves, and then we generalize from there. I just think there's so much that happens starting with individuals that can be generalized rather than starting with corporations that can be individualized.
Most of the big breakthroughs and the world-changing things have kind of worked both ways. Like they start, usually the very, very beginning is with individuals where somebody has an idea, they make a proof of concept. And then you get some company that sees it and turns it into a product. And so it kind of starts on one extreme and then it zips all the way over to the other extreme.
Yeah,
and
no,
then then the candle sort
exactly.
of burns from both ends. And, the next thing you know, everybody's got a computer on their desk.
Right, exactly. And they have to have it. I mean, it's amazing to me that almost everybody's walking around with a $500 or more phone in their pockets, right? And but they're extensions of ourselves. We need them to extend ourselves. But then again, they're also tentacles of Google and Apple. So that's another problem that's not as well recognized as it needs to be. And Apple glosses it a bit by saying, we give you privacy except with us, but that's in certain ways that we're not fully explaining. And
fascinating stuff. I assume speaking of Apple, I assume you have watched the UK snooping charter and its repercussions for Apple and all of that.
Yeah, they did the wrong thing. I think that they should have. I think they should have told the UK, no, we're not going to do that. We're just not, and seen what happened. But they didn't.
I think
they
that's.
rolled.
I think that's kind of what they did, though.
Did they? I don't know. I haven't. I haven't followed it that closely. I mean, I know that. Didn't the UK wanted backdoors or something like that? And
so the issue is iCloud backups, and Apple rolled this feature out where you could have end-to-end, like actually truly 100% encrypted iCloud backups. So when you took a picture on your phone, it got encrypted on your phone, it got sent to the iCloud server, still encrypted, and Apple doesn't have the encryption key to decrypt it. It's only on your phone.
Right.
And so this was a new feature that they rolled out. They had a fancy name for it, like a extended encryption or extended security. I forget exactly what they called it. And the UK said, that's a really nice feature you have there, but we're going to make you put a backdoor in it. We want to be able to decrypt these iCloud backups. And that was a couple of months ago, apparently, that they notified them of that, and Apple pushed back on it. And then the order got leaked, right? Like this was a secret order. It got leaked by Apple, obviously. And then Apple said, okay, in order to comply, because they are required under the law to comply with the order, we're just going to disable this feature for UK users. And so on one hand, yes, they did decrease the security of UK users, but on the other hand, they didn't actually put the backdoor in, which one of the important things to remember here is if you put a backdoor in your software, it's there for everybody, not just for your UK users. And the way the Snoopers charter and the order was written, it did not even tell them, make sure this is only for UK users. No. The order said for everyone. And so Apple is basically, as far as I read the situation, Apple is taking the first step of, if you're going to make us do that, we're just not going to do any business in the UK.
Yeah.
And that, that's a pretty hard stance to take. And they're not there all the way. Like they're taking just the smallest step in that direction that they can. But that's where this inevitably leads if the UK government does not back down. Apple has this option of saying, okay, fine, we don't have any brick and mortar stores. We don't sell any devices there. We don't have a nexus in the UK. And therefore, we're not liable to follow any of your laws.
Yeah, except they have a lot of stores in the UK.
Well, they do at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they'll. I mean, it would be interesting if they pulled out. I mean, Google pulled out of China at one point, and it was a gigantic deal because they didn't want to do what China wanted them to do. This a while back. I doubt they would do that, but I don't know. That's an interesting question. I've always been more fascinated and knowledgeable about the weird things that Apple does. I mean, I don't know why they actually have this thing on their apps where it says you can ask the app not to track. Why not tell it you're not going to track? Just prevent it. Just prevent it. Tell them. Don't ask. Tell them. But they don't. They have ask, and it's like, well, what does that mean? I mean, it means they don't have to obey your request. It's a request. It's not a demand.
Yeah.
But they advertise it like, hey, look, I blew up these spies. They all turned into vapor. No, you didn't. No, you asked them not to spy. They're still intact. All those molecules cohere. It didn't make sense to me. But
You think you dropped a Moab on them? No, you just put a sticky note on your door. That's all you just did.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, it was.
So
I don't know.
With the backdoor thing, he's actually a cryptographer, but I followed his thoughts on it. He was one of the guys that broke the story, I think, and wrote.
Who's that?
You would ask me that, now wouldn't you? I'm sure I could.
His name is he.
I don't remember. He's a professor and a cryptographer, but he had this idea that I thought I don't know that it's going to happen, particularly not in our current polarized and political climate. But it was a brilliant idea, and that is, we should just pass a law in the U.S. that says that U.S. companies are not allowed to add backdoors at the request of other governments.
Yeah.
And that would pretty much take care of it. And whenever there was a conflict in a case like this, you would suddenly have the U.S. government as a party to the conflict, and that would sort of change everything.
Interesting thought. Having hung out at a lot of universities, I'm always struck how it's basically because they have law schools. That the answer is policy. What is the question, right? That's almost where they always come from. We need laws here and regulations, and I would rather have standards and practices and let the world take care of that. Not that we don't need laws. Obviously, we need to be able to drive on the right and stop on red and stuff like that. I'm not kind of full libertarian on all that stuff, but I just see so much more opportunity where we're not starting with regulation. If we, I always like regulation to be the cart that follows the horse rather than the cart in front of the horse. Like right now with AI, I just think all AI regulation is just not even going to happen. And it's and now at least in the U.S. we have an administration that I don't know, it's not worth going into, but everybody I know who wants policy to happen is basically looking at their hands right now. It's like, I guess not for the next 4 years. It's sort of. So.
Yes. Matthew Green.
And I'm not saying I favor that, by the way. I don't have a political position.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. Matthew Green is the cryptographer.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's got a. Cryptographengineering.com is his website, and he's got thoughts on this and a bunch of other things. He's one of the voices that I follow. But yeah, he has the suggestion that we just need to pass a law in the United States that. And here's the thing that I really liked about this. Like, if you could get that idea before the right people, that's something that, in theory, should make sense to everybody, right?
Yeah.
We will not allow U.S. companies to add encryption backdoors at the behest of other governments, and that's specifically the way that he put it. And it's like, that seems like a win, no matter which side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah, because the company could now say, "Well, we're a U.S. company, we can't do that."
Yeah,
and the U.S. has this law. We're operating, we're registered in Delaware, Texas, wherever it is now, and that makes sense, and I would hope that it would appeal. To both sides in Washington, but who knows? I've given up betting on any of that.
Indeed, it's kind of like horse racing, right? What's the quick to be able to win a small fortune doing it? What do you have to do? Well, you have to invest in a large fortune. Yes,
start with a large fortune.
Yes, that's how betting on all that works. Oh, goodness. All right, Doc. I feel like we've covered this fairly well,
fairly well. It's I should add. It's so early. That's part of my point with this is that we're early enough with personal AI that, at least of the kind that I envision, that's on the PC model, it's personal computing model. The important fact about which is, or aspect of which is that it's yours. That's basically it. When it's personal, it's yours. But we're just completely early with that. We'll see where it goes, or we'll make it go where we'll see it goes. That's the better thing.
That's the part that intrigues me the most. That's why I wanted to have you and talk to you about this, because we're in the position now where those of us that are sort of the programmers, those that are researchers, those that are working on open source projects, we're still kind of in the driver's seat on this thing. In a way, in the direction that we wanted to go for personal, because none of the big companies right now seem to be working on that aspect. I mean, sure, you've got OpenAI that with ChatGPT, they've got this idea of as you talk to ChatGPT, it remembers your conversations, and therefore the AI becomes personal. But that's not really what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we outnumber them. We have whatever them are.
That's also true.
I'm reminded of what Bill Joyce said at Sun Microsystems back when they were a thing, because it was so fond of calling itself smart about everything. He said, most of the smart people in the world don't work here. They work somewhere else or on their own. And there are a lot of them. There are only some of us. And that's sort of, I mean, to me, that was always the most interesting thing about Linux and all the open source development, is that there's just a load of people out there doing their own thing, right? So, I mean, even what you were saying earlier, well, isn't this already being done here or there or there? Go to Hugging Face. Look at all the stuff happening there. What a brilliant site that is, just to have that list.
Yep.
It's massive. It's massive. And, so it's just, I mean, I think there's just, there's a lot to play with right now. And as the models get better, we can use them personally, we can use them locally. Thank you for your model. We'll just work with that. I just think it's really early in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is.
Well, I am definitely going to look at the LLMII. I will actually reach out to these guys and see if they want to do an interview as well.
LLMII.
Yeah, it's to take your images and go through and index them, add tags to them, and try to figure out what is in there. Do it on your own local machine, and
I get Luthier's Mercantile International. So, but then if I had images, no, I get stock images, and this. Okay. Well, I'll look it up.
I will add I'll add the link to the show notes. It's on.
It's
on GitHub.
Show notes, and But take a look at LM Studio too, because
I pulled that one up. They've got. They say that their models and their CLI are all open source, and then the GUI, the fancy looking thing that you actually run locally, is not.
Right.
But that is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I somebody demonstrated that to me when I was in New York a couple months ago, and it was pretty remarkable. I said, "Well, I'll yank this one out, I'll put this one in. I'll yank that one out, I'll put this other one in, see what it says, and I'll have used this one to ingest all this stuff, and pretty interesting.
Yeah,
pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Is there anything we kind of talked about your plug for the whole show? But is there anything else that you wanted to plug?
Oh my gosh! Well, I'll plug Kwai, KWAAI .ai. It's an all volunteer thing. Yeah, AAI.ai. They now have a new user interface where my face rotates among some others of people that are also unpaid volunteers, but a fun thing is that it is, there are three significant organizations that have, based their work on, at least to some degree, on stuff I've written, and they're one of them. Consumer Reports is, to some degree, with their future plans, and Tim Berners-Lee's Solid project, so. Which Tim himself told me was inspired this book I wrote that was a worse seller, except for the fact that he bought it, which is like, okay. I don't know if he bought it, but he had it. And good for that.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't mean I'm right about anything, by the way. It doesn't mean that I said some stuff.
Anybody can write a book.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can write a book, just get an AI to write your book for you. So it sounds so generic. Goodness. By the way, I've done all kinds of stuff with AI images. It's so interesting to me, just a quick parting thought, that, 6-8 months ago, being able to come up with an AI image for something was so brilliant and fantastic. And now it's so cliched. It's like you see them and you know that was done by an AI.
Yes.
And so that didn't take very long.
No, it didn't. It didn't. So
Anyway.
I'll get your final prediction then. What's the next thing after AI? What's going to be the next flash in the pan? Are we going back to cryptocurrency or?
No, I mean I do think I'm really scared of the strategic Bitcoin reserve that our current administration came up with help from Elon Musk. Not only because I worry about the dollar losing its a reserve currency status. I think that would be a bad thing for the world. But I think it raises the possibility of that. So, and I say that based on nothing other than my own butt. It's just like, how is this not a good thing? It might be not a good thing that way, but I don't know. As for what's coming, I mean, well, I'll tell you one thing. We need words other than AI because it's not artificial. It is not intelligent. It's a collection of other capacities, and we anthropomorphize this stuff. We say, oh, it's trained and it learned. No, it didn't. We use those terms because they make sense to us, but that's not what actually happened. And I sort of see in coming years multiple 2, 3, and 4-letter acronyms that mean these other things that these machines do, and or not machines and software or whatever, But I don't know. I mean, I think actually one big thing I think will happen, and I just say it only because of motorized bicycles, is that there are going to be a lot more people traveling around on those. I like playing with those. I think it's a better way to get around in a city or even a town. They're pretty handy, and I think we're going to see a lot of change around that. It's not self-driving cars that are going to change everything. I think it's going to be motorized bicycles. But self-driving cars, go to San Francisco, holy crap. I mean,
Yeah.
they're everywhere. And it changes the way traffic works. I mean, it literally does. Like, oh, these things obey the lights. Okay. I mean, it's sort of like that.
Oh, that's funny. That's great. So I'm starting to see them here in, basically the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. We've got several. I remember taking a trip and going, wow, it's a Tesla. And the guy I was with was like, I saw like 5 of those on my way here. Like, that's the first one I've ever seen in person. And the other day, I went to the doctor and there's a Cybertruck sitting there. I'm like, oh, cool. It's the first one I've seen in person.
That's one of the 2,000 that got sold. And
yeah, not a whole lot of those out there yet. But yeah, it was here in Lawton.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, why not? But go play with it. I mean, I have Tesla has gone from new hat to old hat rather quickly, and it hasn't. I mean, I think in a certain way it could end up being like the Volkswagen. Every Volkswagen Bug sold between like 1952 and 1970 was the same. I mean, it looked the same. It changed a lot on the inside, but they were basically one design. They just kind of kept going like that. Okay. Tesla is in a good position, I think, to normalize the way electric cars work. But I don't know. I have a hard time figuring out. I just think that there's we're at a weird moment in time with that company.
Yes. If we could really actually read those tea leaves successfully, we would be millionaires from stock market trading and all of that stuff. So
I know it's like I mean, if buying Bitcoin had been easier for me way back when I thought of doing it, it's like, how many of us think the same thing?
Yes.
Right? Oh, my God.
I distinctly remember thinking, oh, man, I wish I had a couple $100 extra so I could buy some of these Bitcoins.
I know. Right. Yeah. And there are people we know. I mean, John, our producer on Twitter, in the past,
Mm-hmm.
he had a whole bunch of Bitcoin, doesn't know where it is at all,
Oh,
you know.
yup,
And I know other people who say the same thing. Well,
yup.
I have it. I think I did a Xerox copy of the key or something like that. But I don't know where that is. You know, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. All right. Last two questions I'm
Okay,
going to
man.
ask you before I let you go. And that
Yeah.
is, what is your favorite text editor and scripting language?
Oh boy. Um, oh, I guess. I mean, it's funny because I was thinking today, I really need a text editor for this one, and I'm not sure. Um, I mean, back in Linux Journal, I used VI, so there was that,
Mhm.
and but for scripting, nothing. I mean, I don't do any of it, so it's like it doesn't. It's sort of like, what are your favorite skis? Well, I don't ski anymore, so I don't know. It's like been a long time.
Yep.
Um,
I understand that.
my favorite is whatever somebody else uses for me. I'm at that stage.
Yep. There
Yeah.
you go. All right. Hey, thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming in at the
Thank you
last minute.
too.
And
I miss this thing. It's always a fun thing to
oh
do.
yeah.
I'm glad you've kept it going.
I am too, and I'm super glad that I've gotten you and even Randall in the rotation.
That's
of
great. You brought
co-hosts.
Randall back.
Yeah,
Randall is the
we've had a lot of fun
the
with
old
that with
hat,
both of you.
the old hand at this.
Both of you
Fantastic.
guys have been a lot of fun to have back in. So we will definitely do it again. Maybe we'll have both of you on the same show at some point. That would be interesting.
Oh, that'd be interesting. That's never happened. We hung out on boats together a lot 1,000 years ago when he was on every cruise that ever was.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to him about that actually. Like, what was it about cruises for you? And,
Maybe for the 1,000th show or the 1024th show, we'll have both you guys on. That'll be fun.
oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
let's do
Yeah.
it. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, man. We'll
All
see you
right.
next time.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. If you want to find more of my stuff, there's, of course, Hackaday. It's where the security column goes live every Friday morning. And we appreciate Hackaday being the new home of, not so new anymore, but the home of Floss Weekly. I've also got that other show, the Untitled Linux Show, that's still over at Twit. Have a lot of fun there if you want to find that one. And we appreciate everybody that's here to catch us live and those that get us on the download. And we will see you next week on Floss Weekly.